Hello and welcome to another Atlanta.net Users Group meeting, virtual edition. And we're going to get kicked off here right quick. We've got Tyler Thompson with us tonight. He's going to be covering some Blazor. Tyler's been, I guess, writing code for nigh on 20 years or so. Right. Which you call one of those full stack developers, but been spending some time with Blazor and going to be sharing that with us here shortly. I'm going to turn it over to Tyler right now, and if you have any questions during the presentation today, what Tyler has asked is that feel free to unmute your mic and go ahead and ask. I'll be monitoring the chat. If you want to ask in the chat, I'll try and field those for you. And if you're not asking a question, please keep your mic muted so that doesn't get too distracting. And with that, Tyler, take it away.
Terrific. All right, let me share my screen here. All right, well, thank you very much for...
I would say if you're not Tyler, turn off your camera as well.
All right, thank you very much for having me here to talk a little bit about Blazor and my experience with it. I am Tyler Thompson. As Ken was mentioning, I've been self-employed. I've been an entrepreneur from the beginning and started out as a graphic designer. Went out, found clients, and just started developing brochures and business cards and letterhead, and always had an interest in programming. And so went out to Barnes & Noble and Borders and found books on classic ASP. It wasn't classic at the time, but it was ASP and VB script, and just got started doing that at night, and then found clients for that and started there and just kind of self-taught along the way, and almost an island in the beginning there. Didn't really know anybody else doing what I was doing. But obviously now things have changed a lot, and so we can get together with the community. I love C#. When I first saw .NET and saw C#, I obviously jumped right on board, and because I didn't have anything legacy that I had to support, I was able to jump on it both feet and not look back. And so that's been great, and working with the Microsoft stack has served me well all these years. From SQL all the way up, running on Windows servers and IIS, and all those things were just kind of self-taught and self-learned through trial and error as we went through and tried to build products for people and also for ourselves. I've been using Blazor in production environments for just over a year now, and that's been a great experience, which we're going to get into right now, of course. And then on a daily basis, I'm doing custom full stack development, consulting and training and mentoring. And then if you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to me through my website, signlogicsolutions.com, and just contact me through that, and we'll start a discussion. So I actually wanted to start just to come with value to start. I wanted to bring 6 Visual Studio tips and shortcuts that I use every day, just to bring something that you guys can take away from this, hopefully right away, and be able to apply it right away. So first thing is tab locations. And this is from my friend John Haldy. He's the first one who showed me this. Up until Visual Studio 2019, we always had situations like this where we had multiple tabs up here. They'd wrap. You'd pin the ones you're working on. You'd unpin them. You start looking for one, and they end up being over here in this list. And it just never was a great situation. I was constantly closing things. And so John showed me that I do this all the time now, is tabs can be with a little gear icon here, you can dock them to the left or right, and what it does is it actually will sort it based on your project, and then here are all the things here alphabetically, and then you can also still pin things. And so that's a great thing. This is my layout. I know this is a little bit small. I'm hoping the code is big enough for everybody to read here, but this is my layout for all my day-to-day work. I have my ReSharper file structure on the left, and then code. I have my tabs here, and then my Solution Explorer and any to-do items here. So that's the first tip. Second tip is line manipulation. So we all know, so if I came to a product service, let's say, we all know that we can copy, cut, and paste individual text like this. Sometimes we have to get to the point where we have to copy a line like this. Like if I wanted to add another hard-coded product here, I could do Control Shift and go to the end and highlight it. I'm sorry, highlight it on the row there. Or I could actually start to drag it and then get to here, and it kind of snaps, and it's always kind of a pain. And so, if you noticed, when you single click on a line, you'll see this gray box around the line, and that means that you're actually going to manipulate the entire line. So if I do Control C and Control V, I'm actually pasting the entire line. And so I use this all the time, and it will always paste. And so then I also can cut the same way. It will always paste above the line you're on. So right now I'm on this line, and I hit paste, and then it's going to paste it above it, and then I can undo that. And then part of that same scenario is that you actually have Control D, and Control D, the nice thing, so I'm going to copy Fuji Apple. I'm going to do Control D, Delta, and now it's duplicated that line, whatever I have highlighted, but then I can come here and I can do Control V and get my paste back. So it hasn't killed it hasn't clobbered my clipboard. And then with that in mind too, another one you can do is Control Shift Victor V, and then this is your clipboard ring. And so here you can come in here, and so sometimes I might copy this, jump to a different page, and then pull up my clipboard ring and be able to pull those back out in the same way. So that is.
We were getting a little bit of feedback on if you could make the fonts a little bit larger.
Oh, sure.
Just
how about you can go 50.
Yeah, that should be good.
And I know that I'm on a Mac, and it's 4K, and so I know this is probably a little bit hard here. So we'll definitely focus on the code though. Okay, great. Tip number 3 is class navigation. There's multiple ways to navigate, and that's what I love that the Visual Studio team has made it really easy to get around. So Control T will bring up your file. Oh, well, actually, if you type in F here, that will get you to file, and then you can start to type in, let's say, program, things like that, and that will get you there. What you can do here is you can also hold down Control and then Control click on something. You can see it gets a blue line underneath it, and then that will take you to the item. Sometimes you have, like here, this from result. I don't have the actual class here in this line, but I might be able to hover over this, and I can actually come in here and I can click on the line here in the tooltip just like that, and so that will take me there. And then dealing with interfaces, sometimes when you're at, so like let's go to startup. And if I want to go to this interface right here, if I hit F12, that will take me to the interface. But a lot of times you actually want to get to the implementation. So if you do Shift F12, if you do Control F12, it will take you right to the implementation. And if there's more than one implementation, it will show you that in the dropdown. All right, that's class navigation. Add new file. So this is an extension. It's an extension by MADS, and I use this all the time. This is an extension. It's globally, so it's once you install it into Visual Studio, it's available for all your projects. And so typically, I could come over here and I could right-click and I can say Add new class. But what I like to do is do Shift F2, and then here I can actually say I want to create a new folder called DTOs, And then I'm going to say invoice dto.cs, and then that creates it and creates the folder. And so it's just a quick way to create files. I can put a comma there and create multiple files, and it's just been an extension that I use all the time. All right, paste special. So you guys, again, a lot of these you probably have seen already, but these are just things that I do all day long, and so it's just a way to be efficient. A lot of times when I'm working with an API, I might get something like this that shows me what the result might come back from via Postman or whatever it might be. So I'm going to grab the JSON, and in this case, I'm going to put it right here. So this is an invoice DTO, and I can come up and I can say edit, paste special, paste JSON as classes. And so what that has done is actually gone through that JSON and created this out. And so it gives me a great starting point to work through this code. So I'll come here and I'll actually do something like this, and I'll start doing Control X to delete the line, delete the line, delete line, and so forth. And then now I'm down to this point. Now, obviously, I have all these classes in this one file, and I'm going to use resharpers. You could obviously come here and do Control period. Actually do Alt Enter, and you can move this file to a different file, to its own file. But I'm going to go over here and use resharper, and I'm going to say refactor, move types into matching files. And that's just a quick way to do that. So you can see that now all these DTO items for this invoice DTO are all in here with all the correct namespace. So that is paste special. And then text manipulation. So sometimes, like if I come into this vendor, I see that it has not, based on the JSON, it was lowercase. And so you guys have probably seen this before, but you can hold down Alt and then drag a box. And so in this case, I'm just going to drag it around the first characters, and then I'm going to do Control Shift U, and that's going to give me an uppercase. And then, but then you have a situation here, like maybe in this case, I want this vendor to be, I want to get rid of the setters. I only want to have getters on them. So what I like to do, instead of setting these, lining these all up, I can come here and highlight this, and I can do Shift Alt period. And every time I hit that, it's going to go grab the next match. And so then I come through here, and then I can clean it up like that. And so these, again, these things that I do on a daily basis. And so something like that would be, if I come over here into startup. So here's a situation that I do where I come in here and I say, okay, well, I have this add transient for a product service, and I want to add it for the invoice service as well. So I'm going to do Control D to duplicate that line. I'm going to highlight product because that's the only thing that changes in this line. And then I'm going to do Shift Alt period. And now we've got that one. And I can just say invoice. Invoice. And so that is something, again, oh, actually, while I'm here, every time I see these using statements that aren't here, you can do Control, let's call it Romeo Golf, and that is, and I remember that as real good. It's real good to clean up your using statements, and so so as I'm jumping through different files, I'll look and see if there's unused using statements and clean them up that way. All right, and then I actually had a bonus one here for you, Razor code font. So with Razor, with Blazor, which we're getting into, which uses Razor pages, you come into a page, it's going to be something like this. You'll see this kind of darker gray background everywhere, and it is, to me, it's much harder to, let's see if I have fetch. It's much harder to see what's going on. I know it's supposed to tell you that, hey, this is a block of code, but for me, I don't like that. And so to turn that off, you just come up here to Tools, Options, and then Fonts and Colors, which is, you can just do a search if it's in environment, but environment, Fonts and Colors, and then come down to HTML. So it's about 3 clicks. And then you get to HTML Razor code background. change that from default to automatic, and you'll be much happier. And so that is the final tip there. So again, please yell out any questions if you have any. Let's meet the client. This is for the Blazor application that we're talking about, and because this is production code that we're going to be looking at, I have gone through and sanitized the application and all of my code here and all of my slides. And so my fictitious name for my client is Blue Sky, and they sell equipment to other companies who build factory automation equipment for places like Amazon. And so when I met this client, it was beginning of 2019. They had a project where they wanted to create this Blue Sky customer portal, and that is some place that their customers and employees would go to check availability for products and also pricing and a couple of other things. And so it's not a high, there's not a huge amount of traffic to the site. We're about 70 people a day using it, consistently and concurrently. And so it's not a high traffic situation. And my client gave me the freedom to choose what technology we wanted to use for the front end. And so his only requirements were that it's fast loading, the data and navigation of it. He didn't even care how it looked really, he just wanted to make sure it loaded fast. And then support for multiple customer accounts per user, so that employees should be able to go through and find customers and dive into that customer portal and be able to see with their pricing and so forth. And then also customers should be able to have multiple accounts that they can actually manage. We also need to be able to support Internet Explorer 11 and then be mobile friendly. So the original site, when I started working with the company, they were building a .NET MVC application, and that was a work in progress. This is a custom .NET library that sits on top of, it's a VB.NET library that sits on top of a btrieve database. And this is the first time I've ever worked with the btrieve database. It's a NoSQL database, it's file-based. My experience has always been in a relational database, and so this was new to me, but it's very, very fast. And so my client himself actually had built this library to sit on top of that, and then throughout their organization, they are actually accessing this data through this library. And so they took MVC and put that in front of that, and so that became their public website using that same library. And so that was working well. One thing, kind of a big thing, was that the credentials, the user credentials, were actually stored in clear text in the files there, so you can actually open that up and take a look at them. So that was one thing we wanted to fix right away. But again, my client gave me freedom to choose what we wanted to do here. And so I was thinking about Angular, and so I like the idea of Angular for all these pros, and so I wanted to be able to use material design because I think it's very clean and lightweight looking. TypeScript obviously is a superset of JavaScript and allowed me to be much more comfortable coming from a C# background to be able to use TypeScript. I loved that it was component based, that I could get in there and build a component and reuse that component and really treat it as if it was a piece of code that has very clear inputs and outputs. It needed routing, of course, and so being a single page application, and CSS isolation was also a neat thing coming from kind of the Microsoft world. I hadn't had that yet, and so it was really neat to be able to have my CSS be at the component level, and so I can make changes that are component level as opposed to making the class, the CSS class, have some kind of ID or something like that to have those apply correctly. We know that Angular is fast and lightweight. It's a very quick download and runs on the client side. It's very mature. There's plenty of material out there and tutorials. And then the hot reloading was super nice, just to be able to use Visual Studio Code, make a change, and see it instantly change on my site. It was great for layout. The cons for me were a steep learning curve coming from the Microsoft stack. It was new tooling environment, so it was using Visual Studio Code, which felt very comfortable, but it was just a whole nother way about doing things using the CLI and the NG tools. One thing that kind of got me was I didn't like that I had to on the API side of things. I would end up creating some kind of a model, and then I'd have to go and create the same thing in TypeScript. And so I didn't like having to kind of reinvent that logic and reinvent that wheel each time. And then again, for me, it was just new conventions, trying to figure out how to name my files, what appropriate layout would be so it makes sense to myself and other developers. So these are the things that we talked through, worked with my client, and he gave me the go-ahead to build the Angular site. And so this is what we ended up coming up with. First thing we did is we took his VBNet library and the btrieve database and put them all on his servers behind an API. And so now anything on the outside here, of course, our Angular site, and then also down the road, any iOS or Android devices would hit the API the same way as anything else. And even anything internal to the company could also hit that API and be able to let the brains of it being in the services layer here. I typically treat controllers as routers, and then I have my brains in the service layer. And then repository to me is just a way to go to a warehouse and grab some data and pull it out or put it back. And so this is where the brains of the whole, the main logic of my client would be. And so this was going to happen no matter what. And so also with this kind of the freedom to experiment with this, I wanted to move to a token-based authentication. And so I looked at a couple different places, and I went with Auth0, and they are able to handle both authentication and authorization through the JWT tokens. And then so in this case, we know that Angular can't keep a secret because it's all JavaScript. And so everything's here. And so we need to be able to get a token from Auth0 and then take that token, and every request we make to the web API to get products or whatever it might be, we're passing that token. And then the web API, this is all C# in here, of course. The web API takes that token, looks at it, makes sure it's still valid, figures out who the person is who's making the request, and then will appropriately get them the data, whether or not, if they have the proper authority to do that. And I think that's everything on this one here. So that went up. The biggest thing for me was Auth0, just because it took some time to kind of get comfortable with the whole JWT authentication authorization and what those claims had in them, just because in the past I'd always used identity and something through the database. And so, but that worked out really well, and Auth0 has great tutorials, and I was able to, and they have a great module that you can plug right into Angular, and so that actually got up and working quite quickly, and that worked out well. So the site was up and everything was going well and continued to go well. The thing I didn't like about it was anytime I went to go make changes, I had to do it mostly in two places, and that was something that I was, it is what it is, but and it worked well, but I was kind of looking for something else. And so again, my client has given me the freedom to kind of explore different opportunities, and as long as the site is easy to maintain and is quick for the users, he gave me the freedom to look into other options. And so about this time, I heard about Blazor, and yes.
Quick question on the authentication.
Yes.
Ian asked if authentication with Blazor auth providers, and what were your issues? Because since you chose Auth0, the pivot from your original auth provider, what were the factors in that decision?
Okay, great, thank you. So the original provider for this particular client was actually just stored in the database, and he was accessing it through here. And again, that was clear text. And so we didn't really have something that was something that we could build on, or I didn't want to roll our own security in that regard. And so that's where we leaned on Auth0 for that. And we'll see here in a second that the Blazor side of it took me a little bit longer to get up and running as far as Auth0, but Angular, they actually play very nicely with Auth0. And so it was just a matter of going to Auth0, getting my my secret key and my public key and all those things, and plugging them into the Angular site. And that actually got up and running pretty quickly. And so I didn't have too much problem there. But we'll see that when we actually do a code tour, I'll show you that that connecting to Auth0 through the Blazor application was a little bit more involved, and I'm still trying to grasp and learn, and so that I want to know it inside and out, and right now I don't feel like I do. All right, so Blazor server, that's what we're here for. This is the thing that we heard about. And what is Blazor server? It's a new client-side UI framework from Microsoft, and so what they've done is made it to where we as C# developers in the Microsoft stack can start to build out this web UI using JavaScript. Using C# instead of JavaScript, and it's such a game changer because we don't have to jump through all the hoops, and that's kind of what I felt like with when I was doing the Angular. I was jumping through hoops to do it. Blazor came out. Blazor Server officially came out with .NET Core 3 in September of 2019. One thing I liked about it was that the code is isolated on the server, so it's just like our regular old server-based rendering, but much better. And we'll get a look at that. And so the way they do that is that the browser will actually reach out to the client, to the server, and then get back and download a small JavaScript file. And that JavaScript file will be used to initiate a signal R connection between the two, and that's called a circuit. And so now, as the user is sitting here at the browser, they're using this communication back and forth. And so anytime they make a change here, there's a UI diff that goes on the Blazor side, and it's only going to hand back through binary. It's going to hand back the difference in that page. And so it's actually very fast. And as we'll see when we start to explore, it really ended up being kind of a combination between a web application and a desktop application, because I can actually fake statefulness in some cases, because based on how we create the different objects, we can keep them at a scope level to where, as long as this connection stays in place, I'll have something in memory that I can work with. And so that's kind of, and I'll show you when I show you the tour, that it gives me the ability to make it feel like a desktop application. And so we'll look at that here. So at that point, I went to my client and I said, this is a new thing that's out. It's officially released. Here are the pros and cons of what we have right now. And, do I have permission to go forward with down the Blazor path? And so as we were thinking through these, Angular has tooling, Visual Studio Code, and I'm sure many of other things, but this is what I ended up using is this list here, Visual Studio Code. And I like Visual Studio Code. It was very familiar coming from Visual Studio, but just like everything else with Angular, it was a steep learning curve, just a whole another way of doing things completely outside of my normal workflow and my wheelhouse. A great thing about Angular is that it's very mature. There's a lot of people using it, and it's battle tested. There's a lot of resources, videos and tutorials, blogs. There's plenty of places to figure out Angular things. Debugging, I'm sure that there's better ways to do this, but I always had a hard time debugging because I would do it in the browser, but then I would end up doing a lot of console.write type things, console.log, whatever. I don't remember right now, but console dot, and then and so writing those and doing it kind of the old school way of just trying to see, oh, did it hit my did it hit my console log there? And so when I come to Blazor, when I look at these side by side, toolings, Visual Studio, that's great. I'm in that all day long. Learning curve, easy to ramp up because of the C# background, everything just worked so smoothly. Production ready, possibly, because it is early in its life cycle and there's some churn in the code, but I've been very happy with it so far. Resources, there's not very many videos, but there's blogs and tutorials. I Am Tim Corey is the first one that I went to that I found who did a great tutorial, a great video package, and that's where I started learning Blazor. And then debugging, we have all the debugging tools that Visual Studio has, and so again, that's just normal. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say about unit testings up here. Jasmine and Karma, I believe, are built in. I never got to a chance where I was actually doing unit testing through Angular, and so I do not know exactly how those work, but I do unit testing on my Blazor apps, and it's just like unit testing anywhere else. And so again, just very comfortable. And so for me, coming from the Microsoft world, Blazor was a great way to ramp up quickly and be able to get a product out the door and be able to maintain it. And it just was within my wheelhouse. And so that's kind of what this comparison has shown me as I was looking at it. So talking with my client, again, showing them the pros and cons. And so this is Blazor server. Blazor WebAssembly is the other model of hosting. And so that did not even come into play because one, it wasn't officially released yet by the time we were going to do this project. And two, it needs modern browsers. And because of my requirement to be able to support Microsoft Explorer 11, it was a no-go for us. The other downside to the WebAssembly is that it's a larger download when you first hit the site, but then now everything's down on your computer through the browser. And so anyway, so Blazor server was the only direction we were going with it. And so the pros, we'll quickly say here, C# instead of JavaScript, component based, just like Angular was. Routing is super simple, and I'll show you that. This has Bootstrap instead of Material. I tried to get Material design to work with this, and it kind of was an uphill battle, and I'm sure there's other ways to do it. And today, if I was going to do it, I would probably use something called Mud Blazor. That looked very promising. Actually, I take that back. I just thought of that and just threw that out there, but I just take that back because I did try that in IE 11 and it did not look well. So Bootstrap is what we ended up going with, and that's built into it out of the box and just super simple to get up and running. In 10 seconds, I can get a new Blazor site running and actually up, and I can look at it and click through the different pages. And then I can also publish it to Azure within a couple clicks. And it was just very painless. I really enjoyed that. Blazor also has the CSS isolation, so you can create style sheets that will only reflect the component that you're working on. And then the most recent versions of Blazor also have hot reloading built in. Coming from a server-side background, it was super easy to ramp up. I was familiar with all the tools and the workflow. We have all again, Visual Studio debugging, code sharing between the client and the server. And so that was kind of a big thing. So I have a common library that both the server and the client use. And so I don't have to rebuild that. And so anytime I add a new one, or if I add new logic, I can do it in one place. And so that's just been nice, not have to jump through the hoops of trying to get the TypeScript version to match. And then all the benefits of .NET Core, which we absolutely love, which is dependency injection, logging, and configuration are all built in. And so this just made it such an easy thing to do. Now the cons to going with Blazor server is, again, it's still early in its life cycle. There could be performance inefficiencies as they continue to work things out and put more time into it. Some of the Razor page tooling, the formatting doesn't work great, and I'll show you a workaround that we do for that. High latency environments, because it has to go to the server, figure out the diff, and then hand that back. If you have a slow connection, you're going to feel that. and then no offline support. But for me, that didn't matter, because if you can't hit the web API, then it doesn't matter if you can have the site running because it's not going to have anything to show you. So those were kind of the cons that we went through. Here's the Blazor application. So my client gave me the approval to do that. So everything's the same. Everything here is the same, exactly the same. And the only thing we did is we swapped this out for Blazor from Angular. So this is the only thing. Nothing changed in the Auth0, and then nothing changed in the web API. And so everything else is the same here. .NET Core 3, the web API is still .NET Core 3. And so this really was a great thing. So we jumped in this. He gave me permission, and I looked back at my emails before this talk, and he gave me the permission to make the switch, and it took me a month to learn Blazor and learn it well enough to actually have our live site switched over to the Blazor application all within a month. And so that just worked out really well. And again, my stickiest part of that whole thing was the Auth0, just trying to understand how that worked with the middleware. So that worked out really well. And again, it's because it was just so familiar, and I didn't have to relearn something to get it up and running. So here, we'll quickly look at a live tour of the application. All right, let me jump over here. I have the application running. This is my web API, so we're going to forget about that for a minute here. And then, yeah, you know what? Before I actually even get a code, I'm sorry, we're going to get in here. So this is the live application. It's running locally, but the online version is really not that much slower than this one. And so it really is a good representation of how fast Blazor is. So as far as the UI, what we did is we actually went to a template site. This is called Inspinia, and took the site, pulled it all apart. So this is a bootstrap site, and even though we can use JavaScript, we don't want to use it we don't want to use it if we don't have to. And so so this is the site that we started from, and then pulled it all apart and got to the bare minimum of what we wanted to here. So so this is their portal, the customer portal. I can come in here and I have multiple customers here that I can look at and then switch between them. Let's do a product search. So I'll do a product search for 1, 2, 3. And so this was the Retrieve database that just brought that back. And then I can come here and load more products. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that I made the price for everything $10. Just again, I don't want any secrets to be released for my clients' sake, because I appreciate him letting me show this product. So here's the product search. You can look at for things that are in stock, things that are stocked, and all stock. We have our different suppliers, different search, and then if the client has an order code that they're going to use or a customer part number. And so part of the requirement was to be able to make it to where, as an employee, I'm logged in as an employee right now, I want to be able to switch to no customer. And as a no customer, I should be able to still see those same products and only see a list price, because there's no customer pricing in that regard. And so, and then I can switch back over here to one of these companies. And so, and we also have other things here that, so I can do a search for a different company. And so right now you can see that we have our favorite customers and we have our recent customers, and I can star this guy, and then all of a sudden we're printing here. So again, this is all server based, going back and forth between the server. Every time I make a change like that, it's actually gone through and hit the database and refresh the difference between the UI. And so I've been super pleased with how well it's performed. And so I'm going to go here to this client. And so now I'm going to do a search here for cable, let's say. And now this is not a full text search. This is searching by item number. It starts with. And so we are actually able to highlight what was hit here. And then I can open up a detail. I can favorite that product. And if we come over here, you can see that I can favorite and unfavorite. And you can see that it's updating it behind the page there. And so again, just a very, very much like Angular as far as being able to work with the DOM. We had another requirement that as an employee, I might be sitting in front of one of our customers and I want to be able to switch to customer view. And so customer view is going to hide the pricing based on, so Blue Sky has their own price, and then they have the customer's price, and then they have the list price. And so so they want to be able to come in here and so I'm here, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, okay, our cost is $9 and our list price is 10, and then my customer price is 9.5. And so then when I'm in front of the customer, I can open that up again, and then you can see that this is here. And so this detail, we're going to come back to this here pretty soon, but because there was a lot of things requirement-wise that depending on if you're an employee or a customer, whether a customer view is on, whether purchase pricing was on, whether this was coming from a cart or if you were in a cart, all these things. There was about a combination of 50 different ways that this page could be painted, this particular pop-up. And so that is where I started to go the idea of trying to have a view model backing this up. And so and let it be tested through unit testing. So I'm excited to show that to you. From a cart, you can come in here and create a new cart. And so we can say test, and then I can add this product to a cart. I can come over to carts, and here's my test, and here's the product again, and I can increment that and close that. Oops, there's a bug. That should have incremented that. I could refresh that, of course, but and so then this should, yep, that should properly show that there. So. Also from the cart, you can jump through here. You can change comments, and I don't have a save button here. In this case, when you blur, it's going to update the database. And so then now you can switch back and forth here, and then export to a CSV. And then I'm using Telerik for my reporting. And so I was able to build my report here to export this. And so then here's my cart, here's my information, here's the comments that I did, and then here's the items part of that. So this is something that I could be handing off to somebody in purchasing. And so cart functionality was another requirement here. So products is this is the main bread and butter of what somebody, whether it's a customer or an employee, will come here for. They want to see what are the available pricing, the pricing and the available quantity, stock quantity and availability. And so then there are also scenarios, so that we're actually starting to collect a list of recent projects that you might like, and then you might actually have your favorites, and then we talked about that. You also might have something from an Excel sheet, and so you might want to say, okay, I want to take these item numbers and paste them over here and search. And then again, this is hitting the database. Again, this is local, but it's just so happy. I'm just so happy with how fast everything is. So here I have a bad item number, and so it came back and said it wasn't found. And then here I can come in here and look at this particular item added to a cart. If I see an error with the description or the pricing or something like that, I can report an error here and submit. And again, all these things, this is just a button. And we're going to look at this in the Razor code. This is just a button with an on-click event, and just like WinForms and how easy WinForms are, just to be able to have something on the page and you click on it and then do this when you click on it. And so it's just worked out so well. So that is there. Oh, for this grid, I'm using DevExpress, and so DevExpress, when Blazor first came out, it had a free Blazor package, and so that's what we're actually using here, and we can actually create our own grids, but they have I don't remember if I have sorting turned on this one here, but we're using theirs, and I can show you what that looks like as well. The rest of the pages, the nice thing about this site is it's very it's a simple site because we're just really pulling data. We're not doing heavy form submitting things and having to worry about who came in first and things like that yet, as far as database rights, and then letting the user know that somebody had just changed this in front of you, that type of thing. So that's a bridge we're going to cross pretty soon. But so products, multi-product, orders, and so the orders, you can come in here, you can come and pick on one of these items, and then you can see these items here. So it's a quick way for them to go up here, search for their orders by PO number, order number, or order date as well. And so this is also a Dev Express control. We haven't used very many Dev Express controls. I believe we're doing it for the pop-up, for this date selector, and the grids. Those are the only things. Everything else is just straight 100% Bootstrap and then Blazor. Shipments is just like orders, and actually the same grid, and we're just populating it with different data. This load more goes out and skips the records that it's already found, and then just grabs the next ones and pulls it that way. And then quotes, you can just search for a quote there, and then carts we already looked at. So yeah, so it's a pretty simple. I'm not going to log out right here, but this is where we log out and log back in. Oh, and then and it is also does a great job with sorry, I'm bouncing around here. So I could search for a different customer, and then all of a sudden now this customer, I'm looking at this customer and he does not have any carts. And so then I can switch back to this customer who does have carts. And so this is what it would look like on the iPhone. And so it's worked out really well, and that's obviously leaning on Bootstrap for that, and being able to do the responsive mobile first sites there. And so that is a quick overview of the site, as far as just to get you an idea of what the site looks like and how it behaves and what the requirements were. And obviously you can remove items here and delete the cart. And then what I would like to do is show you the architecture and then the code itself. So one thing, when my client told me that we had to have one user be able to log in and switch between different companies, I wanted to try to figure out what I can do there. And so we came up with this idea. So here's the same page, here's the same layout of the site that we just looked at. These are all the pages that we were just looking at. I have a couple of hidden here because I wasn't a super user there. And so here's the product detail that we were looking at and the view model behind that. Here's the user detail for the users for the admin. And so, but the key is these pages here. And so these pages here are all looking at something I call app state, and app state exposes a view model for each of these guys. And then so what happens is that they're all looking here, and then a user comes and switches to a different customer. I'm just going to come and grab this and, oh, actually, I'm sorry. I should have zoomed right back in. So I'm going to come in here, grab this, and just point it to the other customer company. And so then now, these guys don't even know that anything happened. They're just still looking at this guy saying, hey, show me my view model. And this guy goes and says, oh, yeah, I'm going to grab the view models that are associated to this company. And so what that allows me to do is, if I come back to the site, sorry, is I can go to products. I have a search for cables here. And this is where I was mentioning that this is very much like a desktop app in this case, because it has state. I don't have to store it in a page, code view behind view state. All I'm going to do is I can come in here, I can switch to a different customer, and I'm remembering what the dropdown was here, what the search results were, what the values were that they had here, and all those things. And so I'm storing those in those view models, and then as I'm switching between these, I'm swapping those out. So again, here with the cart, you can go here and all of a sudden this guy doesn't have a cart, and then come here to this one. So all I'm doing there is switching between these different customers or no company, and then the view models that are in play there. And so that worked out really well for us because, again, yes, these are in memory on the server. As long as that circuit is around, these are going to stay in memory. And then if that circuit gets disconnected gracefully, where you close the browser tab or closing the browser tab, if you disconnect from the internet, if you have a network error, that would be an ungraceful one, I'm sorry. But if you just close the browser tab, the server will release that memory right away is what I was looking into. And so we have a couple experiments for that, but that's the way it should be. And so again, for our situation, we have about 70 concurrent users, and we haven't had any performance issues or any memory issues. And just looking through and seeing a couple different experiments that Microsoft have done, For kind of the basic D1 tier Azure site, they can get up to about 5,000 concurrent connections without any kind of degradation. And then bumping that up to another tier, you can get up to about 200,000 concurrent ones. And so that was, again, just some things I've seen. I haven't proven that out myself, but I've been super happy with it, and I have not had my client. Everything right now is hosted currently on my client server, and I have not had any issues with memory exhaustion or anything like that for our current workload. So here's the site, and again, it took me about a month to learn Blazor and get it to the point where I had this site up and running. And then we've been adding on features since then, of course, but it was really a smooth transition. And so there's the architectural overview. And then now we'll do a code tour. And so we're gonna look at the file structure, dependency injection, logging, configuration, authentication, authorization, pages, components, view models, and unit testing. So here's the web API. This is just sitting over here. He's sitting on top of the client's btrieve database. And then here is the Blazor site. So right now this is running. This guy over here is running. He's running. My API is running on IIS locally on this computer, and he's just sitting there and waiting, listening for a request. And so then here's my Blazor app, and let's start. I'm going to close all my tabs, and let's just look at it here. So I did install Zoomit, but I did not try that out yet. So we'll just talk through this here. So here's the main Blazor site. Oh, actually, I guess I'll walk through it. Main Blazor site, tests for the Blazor site. This is UI, which is just common elements like maybe a loading button, or one thing that we did that I forgot to mention to you is each of these, I made a delayed search. So if I hit T, after a second, it will do a search and then perform the search. And so we end up creating that just using a timer. And so those are the kinds of things that we put into this Blazor UI project, because the client may want other Blazor projects throughout the company for other reasons. And so we can use this as a common Blazor component library that we can have consistency between the different projects. Blazor Blue Sky Core is going to be our common models and enums and all those types of things that we want to share between the server and the API and the Blazor app. And then we have tests around those. So let's just look here real quick. And again, I'm just going to bounce around, but then speak up if you have any questions. But so this is our shared library. I called it .core, and I wish I had called it .common or something like that, because .core is now way too common everywhere else. But these are our different enumerations for the site. And again, I didn't have to create these twice. I didn't have to go over and do them in TypeScript as well. And so that's worked out really well for sharing. Also exceptions. If I hit an exception with a btrieve database, common extensions like my string extensions and so forth. And then models. And so that's the biggest part, of course, is to be able to say, okay, I'm going to create an order object, and the order object is going to be the same for both of them. And so so you can see here that we're coming in, we're creating these, and these are just DTO objects to be able to have getters and setters on them, and they're just to go back and forth between the server and the server and the Blazor client. There's nothing much else. That's just a simple thing, and then we have our tests around that, and we can look at that if we want to. Here are those things that I was mentioning to you, that like this Blazor loading bar. So when we're doing a search, we're getting the loading bar up there, and so that's just a common piece that we have throughout the applications. And then we have our load more button and so forth. And these are just Razor components. And you can see, and we're going to look at this at other places here, is that the Razor, for Blazor, the Razor markup is going to be your code, your HTML and your code up here mixed, and then you have a code block where you can actually do C# specific type things. And so you can do those up here with an @ symbol in front of it. But this is how it is usually. And so this is the part where I was mentioning that the Razor page, the formatting sometimes gets messed up, and I just don't like that approach. And so you'll see here when we come into the main application, like let's go into pages, and we'll go into, let's say, orders page. You can see here that here's the Blazor, and we'll walk through the kind of different bits and pieces here, but here's the Blazor side of it, the Razor page, I'm sorry. And there's a couple different ways. One, you could have the code block at the bottom. Two, you can create a class and have it inherit from the same base. Or three, you can actually do a partial class. And that's what I prefer to do for all of my pages because it nests them. So all I have to do is name the CS file the same as the Razor file. And because the Razor file is actually building a C# code, I'm going to add the partial class. And now I can have protected items and private items throughout my code, and only the Razor page sees it. And so that's worked out really well. And now I'm 100% in C# world now. And so I don't have, oops, sorry about that. I don't have any formatting issues as far as the mixture of HTML and the formatting issues I was telling you that seem to be there right now, and they're continuing to work on it and make it better. But I just prefer to have my code here in the back. But if we wanted to look at an actual Razor page, we talked about routing, and in Angular, routing is its own module, and it really kind of was a steep learning curve just to understand how the routing engine works on Angular and just doing it the right way. So I spent a lot of time with that. And with Blazor, it's so simple. All we do is do this. Everything here is, whether it's a page or whatever I'm considering a component. A page is a component, and all it is it's a routable component. It means that we have the page directive at the top here, and then this is the orders. And so we could say, oh, if you wanted to be able to have a path that said, they can say orders / and then pass in an ID or some sort, you would capture it that way, and then you would just expose that ID as a parameter in your code. And so you would capture that just like you would like maybe a controller on an API. And so it's just super simple to be able to do page routing. I don't have to think about it anywhere else. I just go to the page I want to. And I actually did, for naming conventions from Angular, I liked the idea of ending the something in the name page and then something in components. And so that way I could look at what I was looking at as far as the component's concerned and see, okay, is that supposed to be a page or is that supposed to be a component? And so then I've been able to do it that way. The authorized attribute means that that's going to play, and we're going to look at the startup code here, but that's going to play into the whole authorization and authentication, well, in this case, authorization only. And so this will actually kick out, just like again on our controllers, will kick somebody out of here if they come in here and they're not authorized. And so you can actually go in here and, if I remember correctly, it's coming in here, and then you can actually tell different claims and different schemes that they would have there. And so mine is super simple. We just have customers, employees, and those are only two. And so we haven't had to do, both of them have access to this particular site page. And so again, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but the idea, or maybe I do, we'll see what you guys want to do, but this is a component that we created called a page loading component. And so what I'm doing here is I'm looking to, and I'm equating to see, is my model, because I have a model behind the scenes. And if we want to, oh, that's all right. I have a model, and remember I said that we went through that app state. I look at the customer account, the current customer account, and then I grab the orders page view model. And so that's what I'm doing here, because my goal is to make the markup be as dumb as possible. I don't want it to have to make any decisions about what to show and when. And so I want to make sure that the model, and that's again just the idea of saying I want to lean on the model. I want the model to be something that's completely unit testable, that all the logic lives in there, and then it would just come in and say, okay, show this if this. And so all of a sudden you have if blocks around here, and they're only looking at the model, and the model is the one who's making all the decisions. And so on this particular page, so if we come here, we'll go to the same page. So we're on the orders page. We have a drop down here. We have this text field here. We have a drop down here, and the statuses and the search button. And so, and then the grid and a load more button that will add more items to the grid. That's what we're looking at here. And so what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I'm putting an if block around this model. If that model hasn't been loaded yet for whatever reason, I'm not going to show any of that markup. So because it doesn't make sense to yet. And so instead, I'll be showing this page loading component. And so so then if the model is not null, then I can go ahead and start to actually build this out. And so these are our, this is that delayed trigger input component that we created. And this is, and that's what I love about this, is that we're building a building block that has inputs and outputs. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want the search text from my model to be bound to this particular component that we created. And then when somebody triggers this component, I want to call this method. And so it's just super easy, because now this component is completely standalone, couldn't care less about who's calling it or using it. And it has inputs to say, okay, how am I going to paint this page? How am I going to behave correctly? And then outputs to say, okay, on trigger. And if you want to, we can just jump in there real quick. So I'm just going to hit F12, and then that will take me, here's my razor page for the piece, and then here's the code behind. And so I call it code behind, but this is my partial code. And so, so in that case, to see the value change and on trigger, all we have to do is create this parameter, mark it with a parameter, and it's an event callback. And so then now at this point, I can come down here and I could say, hey, somebody has triggered you. And so so then I can invoke whatever was I can invoke whatever it's a observer pattern, right? And so it's just saying, hey, is there anybody listening to me? And if so, I'm going to invoke that, and then I'm going to go trigger that. And so that's what I love, is building smaller components that can start to build up to make something more important than just them by themselves. And so that's what we're able to get. And so visibility, right? So visibility is super easy. And so again, this model, I want to be able to say, hey, show this guy only if this is true here. And so then now that goes into my unit test. So here's my unit test. This is my my ReSharper test runner. And so I can go through here. And so let's say, like with the orders view model. And again, I apologize, I'm jumping all over the place here, but these are my tests. So I can come in here, I can mock my different services using our dependency injection and being able to separate out, making our code less fragile by being able to inject the dependencies there, and then also being able to test those in a unit test way. And so in this case, perform search. I'm expecting it to be 10 based on what the mock is up here, and then I'm doing a verify and the get orders. And so so this is verifying the mock here. But so anyway, so being able to, I was not able to, and there might be a way that I do not know yet, but I was not able to come in here and do a unit test on this particular thing. I started going down that path, and then found out that the unit test wants to try to build a renderer, and I did not see how to do that. So that's when I decided, and especially with that product detail page, decided that I wanted to have a view model backing it up. And so then the view model, I love to be able to build my walls around me and say my view model is, so if I come into my orders view model, my orders view model page, I can think about, okay, I'm just code now at this point. I couldn't care less if there's a razor page out there calling me. But then now I can come in here and I can have everything private. I can make sure I have private sets on things if I have to have setters at all. And I can start to say, okay, what do I need exposed to that user? And so I'll actually start in Figma and build out my UI in Figma, look at that page, and be able to say, okay, what do I'm expecting? If somebody was going to use me as a model, what would I want to do? I'd be able to show this and show that, and that type of thing. And so then I can build tests around that. And I started doing test-driven development about 6 months ago, and I love it because it gives me a checklist to be able to go through one by one and say, okay, is this working the way I expect it to? And then keep on going through that cycle. And so I'm a firm believer in that, and that's how I build all my code now. Just because it gives me even when I sanitized this project and brought it over here and was able to run my tests and have them all pass, I was like, okay, great. I feel good about the demo because I feel like the logic is still working the way I expect it to. And so so I really, and I don't know if this is the official way to do it or not, the whole idea of trying to make it a MVVM pattern, but this has worked out super well for me because I can come in here, do something as bare minimum as possible, and then have my view accept that and be able to show accordingly. And then the only thing in the code behind over here that I would, and I apologize, I should, that after a crash, I did not change that back. Only thing I have in the code behind for the Razor page are things that are specific to the page itself. So like this is an on render. So this is part of the life cycle. So after the first render, it's going to come through here and I can say, okay, if this is the first render, then return. If it's not the first render, return. And then otherwise I'm going to look at here and I'm going to check to see if the model number is invalid. And if it is invalid, then I'm going to navigate the under products because there's certain pages that only work with a valid customer number. And then otherwise, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to hook up to my state has changed. And so I'm, again, doing an observer pattern here. And so I'm firing off an event if anywhere else, because if I made a change to customer view model here, everything's still in memory. So when I switch over here, I have to know that I'm supposed to display only the proper pricing when this is on. And so what I do is when this gets triggered, I go ahead and I send out that event to anybody who's listening. And then we're hooking into the dispose, of course, because I'm implementing iDisposable. And so then we can be aware when those things change. So what happens here is that when everything changes here, I'm doing a refresh of my search. And so I'm calling that. So so anyway, I'm sorry that I went probably into too much detail there, but the way that I have it structured is that the Blazor app here, I have components, and those are things that are they may not even be reusable, but they make sense to be a unit. And so the unit that was going to have its own, it might be able to go out to the service directly and grab something. And I have everything sit on top of service layer. And so these are all my services. And so my services are going to come in and I have a service base. And so I'll just come in, so like get right here. Where we were in customer service, I'm going to say get customer. I'm going to pass in the customer number model. I'm going to check to see if it's valid or not. And then I'm just going to call a get on my endpoint, and then it's going to be my customer path, my route, and then the customer number model, which is going to be the customer number when it renders, and then hand it back, and it hydrates a customer number, a customer itself. And so that's obviously using the JSON system. Oh, sorry. It's using system.text.json. And so so it works really well there. So all my services are going into that same thing and making those calls, getting the JavaScript that comes back over the wire. And so again, if we came here and looked at this, I could have created this Blazor, since it's server side, I could have had this guy go directly to this guy and have its own repository and directly talk to this this .NET library. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep this web API to be the brains of everything, to say, hey, I'm in control of the domain logic, and then have this just be a consumer of it. And so that's why we're still going, even though we're on the same server, and we're going to hit that API just like anybody else would from the outside. And so so these are different things that we're doing here. So we have the service layer at the bottom. That's what actually interacts with the web API. Pages are items that I'm considering pages, and so that's a good saying, right? And so that would be all these guys here, all the things that, and a page might even just be a container for components, and that's all I care about. I just want to be able to say, hey, this is considered a page. So all these guys will have the page directive at the top, and so they're routable at that point. And then these guys here, these aren't routable. They don't have a page directive at the top, and so they're just meant to be placed inside the code, and then I'll use Bootstrap to arrange everything and do it that way. So that's pages. Models. I have models on the common, but these models are things that are going to be something that only Blazor cares about. When I'm building a new class, I think about, is this something that another Blazor app could use, or an iOS device could use, something like that. And if it's not something that should be common like that, I want to put it over here because I don't want to muddy my common models solution with models that don't go outside the Blazor kind of world. My extensions, again, for Blazor itself, enums that are Blazor specific. So in this case, it's a toast level, which doesn't make sense to somebody on the server. Components are all the individual components. And then properties, we're bouncing around here again too, but if I go into startup, so startup, and if you've worked with .NET Core, it's really been such a pleasure to work with this because there's so many things built in out of the box. So if I go to, let's say configuration for one. So if I go to program and I look at this create default builder. So right when I spun up this site, this gets created here. And if I use ReSharper to go look into that and unpack that, you can see that it's actually doing a couple things here for us. For the configuration, there's different levels. It starts at the bottom, so it's going to say if there's a configuration that's been set at a command line, use that. If not, if there's one at the environmental variables, use that. Otherwise, use user secrets. Otherwise, use an app setting for the environment that you're in, and then finally use app settings.json. And so, just the configuration has been super easy. So in this case, I can go to my my app settings, and this is at the top of that list that we were just talking about. And so I could have properties here. And then if I want to overwrite them with a certain environment, I might go to my development environment here. And so I might say, okay, I want to show errors here. I want to log to the console, and where in production I don't want to, things like that. And then I can't show you because I actually have secrets over there. But one thing I really like is secrets. And so secrets, I can come over here, I can right click and I can say, manage user secrets, and this gives me JSON that I can paste my configuration over here. But the nice thing about it though is that if I right click on this guy and let's see, open in containing folder, he's not in my GitHub path or my Git path, so he does not go into the repository. And so these are things like your secret keys and things like that you don't want to get checked into the repository are all here. And so it's so nice because you put them here, and then each developer would have their own version of that. But then now you're not going to check them in, and you don't have to worry about it. And then when you push it to Azure or whatever it might be, you're going to use your Azure key vaults. And so so that has configuration has been super easy. And same thing with the configuration, we can use the options pattern. So in this case, I created, oh, I didn't tell you this before, but we can say Alt F12, and that's going to peek into this class. And so when we come into this class here, we can say, okay, hey, I have a host, a port, a username, and password. And so these are my SMTP options, and this is actually coming from my secrets that I can't show you here because it actually has real things, and we're going on YouTube. But I can take that and say, hey, I want you to go out there, grab that section called SMTP, and then one called Auth0, and I want you to bind it and actually hand me back this SMTP options object. And so what that allows me to do is I can go to like my email service, and my email service gets passed in this options, iOptions, SMTP options, and then I come in here, I unpack it, get the value, and then now I can come in here. And so now I say, okay, now it's strongly typed. So I can say SMTP, and this is from my config. I had those 4 things in my config, and here they are here. And so instead of like we used to do, which was like configuration and try to index it, use it by name as a key or things like that. So as far as things that I love about Blazor and also .NET Core, configuration is a huge thing. Another thing is dependency injection. And so I have made an extension here for services, and I say add services. And so in here, this is where I was talking about there's 3 different ways for you to use dependency injection and new up an object. And so you can either do it transient, where it means that every time somebody asks for a template service or an email service, it's going to create a brand new one. Even if you're on that same circuit, you're going to get a brand new one every single time. Now, for me, when I was where are my view models? Let's just, no, okay, I'm sorry, my view models are the same here. Scoped is what I'm sorry. Okay. App state, I have in scope, at scoped, and my favorite product cache, and then also my token provider. Those are 3 scoped items, and scope means that as long as that user is connected, that browser is connected to the server, you have a circuit, you have a two-way communication going on, this is going to stay in memory. And that's why when I am switching between different customers, I'm actually remembering what they have because this is scoped. If I change this to transient, every time I went to a different page in the site, it would completely forget what they had selected. And so that's how we're kind of mixing the desktop and the client, the web experience. And then everything else is transient. We like the idea of transient just because it just means it's going to get a new one every time. And then these ones up here are special. These ones are transient as well, but they, as far as my understanding, but they are for using HTTP clients so that they can actually do a client factory behind the scenes and be able to hand you a client as needed, and then they take them out of a pool. And so that's why these services who are actually interacting with the web API are all using this HTTP client. And so dependency injection has given us the ability to do unit testing, because now I can go and mock all these things. And that's why in this case, I'm not injecting anything there. And so I didn't need an interface on these guys, but on these guys, I do inject these I do mock these. And so I like to have an interface around them every time I mock something. And so that's the second thing I liked about .NET Core is dependency injection. And then the third thing is logging. So if we go back to here, the other thing is logging. Logging is built in. And so I am doing that probably in, sorry, I forgot where I was. So here I'm using serial log, and then this is how you hook it in. And so you can come in here in an enrichment environment. And so this is all serial log. And then through my app settings, I could determine my log levels and then also what I want to write to. So in this case, I actually do want to write to the console. But then in the development environment, I might want to do the console and write to Logly or something like that. And these are called syncs. And so so it's worked out super easy to be able to have serial log become a logging provider on top of the logging system. And so that's the third thing I like. And then I guess the final thing would be authorization. And this is again, this is probably why I kept it to the last year, is I made this extension to be able to just tuck it away. I wanted my startup class to be a little bit more consumable. But if you come in through here, this is how you add authentication for everything. And so here I'm going, you know what, I don't know why, but I'm using the configuration object here directly instead of using the options pattern, but I don't remember exactly what I did there. And then all these comments, I went to Auth0 and I grabbed this directly from their site. And again, I still want to understand what all these things mean here. I don't understand it top to bottom. And so, but I did get it to work, and it's worked great for the year and a half that we've had it out there. And then the login and log out. But that is right there, the entirety of, so these are my 4 different roles that I have. So I don't have a very clear answer to how it worked as far as working with Auth0, other than it was my own downfall, just because I'd been new to Auth0 and the whole idea. And so there was a steep learning curve in here for me, just because I hadn't ever come across this yet before. But as far as Blazor is concerned, if somebody comes in here and knows this, I mean, this is just all middleware, and we're hooking it up through the services. And so it's been, you know, I'm just like all of you guys. I'm trying to learn every day and trying to get better at what I'm doing and better at my craft. And so, this has been this is on my list of things to continue to go in there and learn. And so, just walking through here. That was the last thing of the .NET Core that I like that we're leaning on. www-root, these are your static files. So this will be your CSS files, images, your JS. Oh, I guess we should talk about that real quick, is that we can call JavaScript files JavaScript. And so there's a couple situations like streaming the download, the file. I had to use JavaScript. And so here's JavaScript that's sitting inside this scripts.js file. And so then my save as file, I had to lean on JavaScript for that as well. And then what I did is I created a JavaScript helper file and wrapped those calls. So we use something called I guess it's the IS there. It's JavaScript interop. Sorry, and so we could call these directly here, but I just made a wrapper around these so that I could, again, try to push this as far as I could to where the consumer of the code can just say .ping or whatever it might be and be able to call these things directly. And so we are, in Blazor, we are definitely able to call JavaScript functions. It's just that our site is no longer driven by JavaScript. And so, and again, that's been a great thing for us. Here are the reports that I have in there, so I can export an Excel, and then I have the PDF version, and then I have I'm using a CSV helper for exporting the CSV file. Launch settings, we can use Kestrel or IIS, and these are the different profiles. And so you can say, okay, when I launch from IIS, I want to be in production instead of development. And so you can test different things there. And it's just really been super simple the way that they've made. I mean, we used to have our app configs and we used to have our web.configs, configs, things like that. This has just been so nice having it as as JSON. It's just really been pleasant to work with. And I guess the last thing, this is more of a, because we just saw, remember we saw that customer number model. We started doing this, and I really like this, and I'm trying to do this everywhere now, is that with primitive obsession, and I could be passing around a customer number because it is a string in the database, it's just a string. And so we actually switched over, and so now anytime that somebody wants to do a customer number, we're saying, hey, you have to give me a customer number model. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, are you valid? And if you're not valid, then I can throw an error or do whatever I'm going to do in that situation. But I love the idea of saying, hey, because a customer number can't be certain things. It can't have special characters in it. It can't do things like that. So we can validate those. And then same thing with an email address, right? So we want to be able to say, hey, I don't want to have to test that. Every time somebody hands me an email, I don't want to test to see if it's valid. I want to say if it exists, then I know it's valid, or I can ask it if it's valid. And so there's been a great way to kind of shore up our code a little bit to make it to where somebody can't accidentally pass us something that's invalid. And I didn't know this until recently, but I like this a lot, is that when you use the implicit operator, then what it's doing is it's saying, hey, here's the value. So I can call a method, give it a string, and it's actually going to create the customer number model from that string. And so it actually works really neat. And then also we have our overriding our toString so that we can actually hand back the string of the value when asked. And then we also have equality there. But anyway, so a lot of different things there. And again, just constantly learning, trying to figure out ways to make the code more maintainable, making it to where people can come behind me and understand what that code is doing, and myself too when I go down and look at it in the future. And so I think, and when we have the question time here in 1 second, we can come back here and dig into any of these things here. But I think that's the majority of the things I wanted to cover there. architecture, code. We said all these things. All right, so then the conclusion is, if I could do this over again, would I choose Blazor Service for this project? And absolutely, I would. It's been a pleasure to work with, and just such a quick learning Blazor from the ground up. Yes, I had a little bit of experience from the Angular side of it, working with components and just the ideas and the concepts there, but it just really is just that it just fits so nicely in with the workflow of everything that we've done all these years with Microsoft and C# and all those things. And so so it's really been, my client's very pleased. He's so happy with how he gets a lot of good feedback on the site, how it looks and how it performs. And then also when we are going to add a new feature, we just jump in there and we start to build it out just like we're building out an API, and it's really worked out well that way. So so yeah, it's been a great thing. And so and even with that too. So would I recommend you do it? And so it really comes down to it matters how many people are going to be using it and what in because it is early in the whole thing. But I would say, yeah, try to, if you can look at it and see it, and you have a team who knows C# and a team who know Visual Studio. It's just like, why step outside of that and kind of learn that whole other wheelhouse. And I like that because I want to learn every time I try something like that. But as far as me getting code that's deliverable, this has worked out perfect. And I'm all the projects that I do right now, I try to do them as Blazor first if it makes sense. And so so that's that. So here's questions and hopefully some answers for you. And so yeah, let's just open that up and see if you have any questions. We can look at code or whatever you want to do. I don't even know what time it is, but
coming up on 8:41. Great
all
presentation. Right. Great presentation, man. There's so many things to unpack in there in the Visual Studio tips section and all of this Blazor stuff. So
thank you. I knew it was going to be recorded, so I kind of went fast with that. But yes, I'm hoping that somebody's picked up something there, because I love learning new things to be able to figure out how to navigate much more efficiently.
Yeah. Check the chat. I think there's a couple more questions coming in there.
All right. So let's see here. Oh, not too many. That's good. So we have the crash. So John asked if I had to do a front end again as of today, would I do it in Angular or Blazor? And again, it depends on the situation, but I would say that I hands down would choose Blazor, just because it just works so well with everything else. It's just another tool in our toolbox, and it really was not hard to get up and running. And so I definitely would do that if it made sense for the client and for the situation. And Ian said, for this project, were you working on premise hosting at first, or did you? So when I used Azure, I haven't gotten into AWS yet. I just haven't needed to yet. I've been super happy with Azure, and it's been able to do everything we wanted to. The Angular side I actually hosted on Azure, just because I had my client's code sitting on. I had my client's code sitting on his server, and I wanted, his database is over there. He's going to be on his servers. He has great infrastructure over there, and so that web API will always live over there. But then the Angular site, I wanted to have more control over it, and so I wanted to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do that on Azure, and so that worked out really well. And Visual Studio Code had a great plugin for pushing it to Azure, and obviously it's just a single file, or a static page, but it worked out really well. And then Blazor, same thing. Other clients, I would host it on Angular. I would host it on Azure, no problem at all. It's really simple, just to, like, with a couple of clicks, actually push it up and be able to do slots, to be able to swap between your live slot and your staging slot, be able to kick those around, and then it works so well with the secrets and everything, so you can have that in your Azure Key Vault. And so yeah, that worked out really great. I ended up putting this site on my client's server just because I was going to have everything over there at one place. And I figured if his application, if his server went down, it doesn't matter if mine stayed up because they both need each other to work. And so I decided it'd just be simpler to have everything on his and under his control. And so that's worked out great and haven't had any downside. I mean, his servers are big enough for the task. And so that's been great. Yeah, so it sounds like Azure and yeah, no infrastructure battles in the cloud. I mean, coming back, back in the day, I started an applicant tracking system with my friend, and we built that, and we had our own dedicated servers that we had not from Rackspace Space, but someplace like that, and that's where we just learned IIS and networking, and we just figured all that out, and it was just such a taxing thing to deploy our application and get it out there. And so Azure's been such a great thing. And so my first thing with Azure is to do an app, a web app, and let them handle everything. I want them just to hand me a SQL Server and hand me an application, and I'll just tap into it as a service, and I don't even care what version, everything, all the updates, all that kind of thing. And so that's worked out great. And so it really works out well with Blazor because I just push it up there and I don't have to have a dedicated VM that I'm running to get it to work. And so, all right, validating if anything, we were also, oh, great, thank you. Yes, I'm glad to see that you are also using it in prod, and I know John is also using it in prod, and John Haldy, and it's been I've heard good things from everybody so far. Third-party components. So I'm using DevExpress, Telerik for the reporting, but Telerik also has their own Blazor components, and then my video is still showing, right?
Yep.
Oh, good. All I see is there. That's good. As long as it is. Thank you. So we're using DevExpress for those handful of components. I'm using Telerik for the reporting just because trying to come up with a PDF straight from code, I just found it so much easier to use a template and be able to lay it out the way I wanted to, especially with paging and page breaks and everything. So I'm using Telerik for that, and then Auth0 for my identity provider, and then nothing else other than the nothing non-standard NuGet package. Those were the only third parties that we're using, and we could probably even get away from DevExpress. We've kicked that around a little bit, but there hasn't been a need to yet. But we can build everything they've done. And I was mentioning Blazor. And Blazor, if it was out when, no, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. I couldn't use it because it did not work with IE11. But they have a material look and feel. And the thing about Blazor, from my understanding, is that they built everything from the ground up for Blazor, 100%. Just like I built a component, just like I built that component, the delay search one. They built everything from scratch, and it's free. Where Telerik, Infragistics, and like DevExpress, those guys are actually, from my understanding, and this might not be the case, but from my understanding, they're actually just wrapping their other products, their other JavaScript-based products. So under the hoods, it's probably a little bit uglier. It's worked out fine for us, but there could be some performance issues there as well. And so Blazor is kind of a component-based thing that they've built, and then everything's built in. And so obviously every time you go to a project, grids tend to be the biggest thing. And so they have a table here, and so it's fine, and there's some functionality that we may not be able to get away from, but anyway, definitely take a look at Blazor and see about ramping up with that quickly. And so yeah, but other than that, no other third-party components. It's been leaning on Bootstrap, of course, for layout and responsiveness for the mobile-friendly, mobile-first. So Colin asked if Blazor server is fully production ready or should wait for .NET Core 6. I have not tried scaling up and trying to load the Blue Sky app. I just haven't gotten there yet. We're so far from kind of that barrier that I've been putting my time and energy into other situations. But I feel like it's production ready. I mean, there's nothing that I've, again, this is only from my own experience, but I feel like I've never gotten to a point where I was like, oh no, my client's going to call me because it's down or something like that. I've never come across anything that's, I mean, to me, it's just like doing MVC, an MVC page, and it's just a different approach to it. And so yeah, I feel like it's production ready, but I guess I'm a little bit more of a risk taker. But and my client was super free to let me experiment, which I appreciate. And so I've learned a lot with it, of course.
And if you listen to the boys on .NET Rocks at all, they would tell you quite heartily that Blazor is ready for production.
Oh, that's terrific.
And I mean, honestly, .NET 6 is 2 months away, so might as well get started now. All you're going to have happen then is you're going to pick up some nice performance improvements and some other capabilities.
That's right.
So,
and you can see from my simple site, it is so performant. I've just been thrilled. Like, if Blazor did all these things that I'm excited about, but it was slower than Angular, I would have to say I can't go there, because that was one of my, I mean, I just don't want to have a slow site, And so because it was very comparable or equal to the Angular site, it's a big contender. And I like that Microsoft, I like the approach that Microsoft has taken as far as they actually care about developers now, and they're actually listening to us, and that's a great. I'm more than happy that I've been hitched to Microsoft over these years and continue to be so. And again, with our IDE being able to have Visual Studio and just work so easily in it, it's just a great environment for us. So yeah, I have no regrets at all doing Blazor, and I think it is production ready.
Awesome. Let's take just one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Do the JetBrains drawing.
Terrific. Let's see, which one would be good here? Jimmy, if I want to do one, Auth0 was not a requirement. I just wanted to, I like the idea of if we did have an iOS or Android third-party device in the future, I wanted to be able to use the same identity provider no matter the consumer, and so that's the direction we went with that. And Auth0's been great. Hasn't had we only had one time it was down for a couple hours, and that was not great. But other than that, it's been great and easy to work with. Once as far as their site and their system and how I was able to work with roles and everything like that. Do you see anything else here that I can answer, or you're good? You're good there. I think they were just talking back and forth. So, yep. So anyway, all that to say, for me, it's been a great experience.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much. This was a super informative. It's like sipping from the fire hose in all the best ways.
That's right.
So,